Well, hi there, everybody. I did not announce this. This is my first Facebook live event, and I just had something on my mind that I wanted to share with everybody. I've done in the past. I've done a blog post and a video and audio post on Abraham's tithe to Melchizedek and why it was so important. I see people bringing up Hebrews 7 in trying to convince people that Abraham tithed, and so we should tithe. Now, of course, I am huge on giving. We should be givers. And giving can take many forms. Giving, of course, can be of your finances. It can be of your material possessions. It can be of your time. It can be of so many different things. That doesn't have to be money. And it certainly doesn't have to be 10%. It can be more than 10%. It can be less than 10%. But it's from the heart. When we give from the heart. And so here, I've done this video post on Abraham's tithe to Melchizedek before, but I just wanted to do it again here on Facebook Live. So anyway, in order to understand Abraham's tithe to Melchizedek, you see, the writer of Hebrews wasn't writing this book of Hebrews, this thing, and thought, I need to get in something about tithing. I need to get these people to tithe. So I'm going to bring in this tithing thing of Abraham and tell people, since Abraham tithed to Melchizedek, that means that we need to tithe to Jesus. That's not what was going on. See, the book of Hebrews, the whole point of it, the whole point of the book of Hebrews is to show the significance and the superiority of Jesus over the old covenant. That's the whole purpose. That was the whole reason for writing the epistle to the Hebrews. He's trying to convince the Hebrews that what they had under the old covenant was a shadow, was a type, but it wasn't the substance. It wasn't the real thing. And so when the writer brings up Abraham, the reason he brings up Abraham, you have to go back to chapter 6. He says, "For when God made a promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself, saying, 'Surely blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply you.'" And he goes on and talks about how God made this oath to himself. So this new covenant was all about God's oath to himself. It wasn't about people trying to keep the covenant themselves, because under the old covenant that failed. So then he brings up Melchizedek. He brings up Abraham's tithe to Melchizedek. "For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all." First, being translated king of righteousness, that's what Melchizedek means, and then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace. Now here's about Melchizedek: without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. So, that's what we have about Melchizedek. That's all it really says. The writer quotes from the Old Testament saying that Jesus is high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And so we go, what in the world does that mean? What's that got to do with anything? And so he goes on to explain it. And just before, I think it's the previous chapter, he says some of these things are hard to explain. And it is a little bit difficult. But if you follow through, you see that he's really using Abraham's tithe to show not how we're supposed to tithe, but to show how Jesus is superior to the Levites of the old covenant. So let's follow on in Hebrews 7. "Now considers how great this man was, Melchizedek, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoils. And indeed, those who are of the sons of Levi, who receive the priesthood, have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the law, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham." So we see that it was the Jews, the Jewish people, they were the ones who were supposed to tithe to the Levites. This has nothing to do with tithing in the church. He's talking about Levites who received tithes from their brethren, the Jews. But he whose genealogy is not derived from them, so Melchizedek did not come from the Jews or from the Levites. He received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. Now here's the key. This is what it's really all about. This is it. If you get anything out of Hebrews 7 and Melchizedek's tithe, this is it. Hebrews 7:7. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better. Abraham is the lesser, and he is blessed by the better. Melchizedek. So keep that in mind here, because that is so important. And then verse 8, here mortal men receive tithes, but there he receives them, of whom it is witness that he lives. I've heard this quoted. I've heard this thing quoted saying that here mortal men receive tithes. So in the church, see, these mortal men, pastors and churches, they're supposed to receive tithes. But that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about this whole thing with Melchizedek having with the Levites being the mortal men. This is written 2,000 years ago, after the death of Jesus. Mortal men were still receiving tithes because although the old covenant had ended, they were still the people who didn't believe. They were still following the old covenant stuff, all the sacrifices, the tithes, all that stuff. So there, at that time, mortal men were still receiving tithes, but back then, Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek. Even Levi, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. So if you can picture this, the Levites, they received tithes from the people, but they had come from Abraham. But when Abraham tithed to Melchizedek, they were not born yet. But they were coming. They were coming through Abraham. They were in Abraham, so to speak. So when Abraham gave his tithe, Abraham the lesser gave his tithe to the greater Melchizedek. The Levites then, through Abraham, were tithing to Melchizedek, signifying not that we should tithe to Melchizedek, but signifying that Melchizedek is greater than the Levites. That's the whole point of Abraham's tithe to Melchizedek. That's it. That's what it's about. That's what he's trying to say here. Jesus came. He is high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus is greater than the Levites, just as Melchizedek is greater than the Levites. So the ministry of Jesus supersedes everything that happened under the old covenant. So again, the writer didn't just say, I need to think about how to get these people to tithe, so I'm going to add something about Abraham's tithe. No, he was using Abraham's tithe to Melchizedek to show the superiority of Jesus. Because if you move on, it says, therefore, here's what I'm trying to say with all this. Therefore, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should arise according to the order of Melchizedek, that's Jesus, of course, and not be called according to the order of Aaron, which is who the Levites came from? For the priesthood being changed, of necessity, there is also a change of the law. Have you ever heard that preached? A change of the law. For he of whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe from which no man has officiated at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord arose from Judah, of which tribe Moses spoke nothing concerning the priesthood. So that's the whole point of all this. Jesus came from Judah. So according to the law, he can't be our high priest because the high priest must come from Aaron. Must come from the Levites who descended from Aaron. The priesthood, according to the law, must be according to by the Levites. Jesus didn't come from that order. He wasn't a Levite. He didn't come from Aaron. He came from Judah. So there had to be a change of the law in order for Jesus to be our high priest. And that's what this is all talking about. It's not talking about us tithing to anybody. It's using Abraham's tithe. See, the purpose of this, Abraham's tithe, the 10%, had nothing to do with anything. It was just showing that since Abraham tithed to Melchizedek, Melchizedek is greater than Abraham. That's the whole point of all that. Abraham's tithe, I mean, if you go and look back at Abraham's tithe anyway, his nephew had been taken, his nephew Lot, and his family, and all their goods. Abraham got this little army together and went and fought a battle and won back all of Lot's family and all their stuff and took the spoils of war. And it was the spoils of war that he gave 10% of to Melchizedek. And then what did he do with the other 90%? A lot of people don't think about this. He actually let his men use a little bit of the 90%. It was goods. It was, things that their men needed, maybe for their horses, food to eat. Maybe some wine was in there. Other stuff was in there that they needed. And so they used that. But then the rest of that 90%, he gave to the king of Sodom. This evil king of Sodom. Where are you going to hear that preached in the church today? So basically, Abraham took none of it. He gave all of it away. So if we're going to use Abraham's tithe to say that we need to tithe, then of course we need to give the full story, which of course people who tell that story aren't going to give the whole story. Well, anyway, the whole reason I wanted to get into this is because I've never done Facebook Live before. I just wanted to see how it works. This particular subject was on my mind today. So this is kind of off the cuff. If you want to discuss any of it with me, sure, feel free to do that, because I didn't really do it prepared. I just thought I'd look in Hebrews 7 and just try this Facebook Live thing out and see what it's all about, see how it works. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. It's my old radio days lingo there. And I'm going to try this again sometime. I really like this. Y'all take care.